Hi, Dr. Blaney here. Today I'm going to start talking about light therapy. I'd like to pose the question as to why you might consider that backlit computers, as well as LED lighting and fluorescence that we're surrounded with at the office and sometimes at home, may not be in your best interest, health-wise and longevity-wise, mood-wise and productivity-wise. I'll go into the reasons why we might want to change our habits for our lighting that surrounds us. Just as a background, for the past 4 years I've been working in light therapy and the science of light and products that deliver specific frequencies of light to the body. So I have a little bit of understanding about light. So I'm going to start with the history of the Earth and how we understand currently that humans evolved in symbiosis with the Earth. So we started out single cell organisms, and then the eukaryotic cells formed little cities of cells, which then turned into multiple cell organisms, which then evolved more and turned into, as far as we know, humans, mammals and humans. So how do humans exist in the world? What makes this symbiosis possible so that there's harmony, longevity, happiness, and procreation of life? We certainly can't exist out in free space, right? Because our bodies would explode, we wouldn't have food, we wouldn't have love, and we wouldn't be happy. We can't live on the North Pole because we would need a lot of technology to survive. And all in all, it would be more trouble than it's worth. I think most people would agree. So what would be the best place to live if you were to drop yourself down from a space capsule on somewhere on the planet? Where would you like to land? Well, I don't know about you, but I might like to land in either Hawaii or San Diego, where there's lots of shade, lots of sun, lots of food growing, green plants, coconut trees with coconuts falling on the ground and so forth, lots of fish. So our starting point is that in order for a human being to be happy and whole, we have to have a nice environment. A safe environment with clean air, clean water, clean food, and a place to sleep that's safe, and most importantly, in the context of this talk, most importantly, sunlight, full spectrum sunlight. That's how we evolved. A lot of people don't realize this, but it's becoming more and more mainstream that light is actually a nutrient. Just like vitamin C, vitamin E, vitamin D, vitamin A. For example, if you don't get any vitamin D, your bones will get rickets. So then if you give people small amounts of vitamin D, like 200 IUs per day, they won't have rickets, but they might still have weakened immune systems. So we know now that we really need about 10,000 IUs of vitamin D per day. That's just one example of why the sun's important, because vitamin D comes from the sun. Dr. Wunsch is one of the leading authorities on light in the world, and he showed in one of his videos a graph that shows on the x-axis UV, visible, infrared, and there's mid, near, and far, and then these are microwaves out here. Cell phones and everything. So these are bad. So what Wunsch showed in his graph was that there was all these bodily chemical reactions that took up space on this graph. And it turns out that every frequency is needed for some biological process. For example, UVA and B. For UVB, there was a little line that was for making vitamin D from the sun, right? And then there's reactions in the green area, the red area, orange, yellow, green, blue. This is the most aggressive wave. This is the most gentle wave in the visible spectrum. So your eyes. So I'll refer back to this graph. But there's a lot of chemical reactions. And you need these light waves just like you need, for example, nutrients such as omega-3s from fish oil, because our body doesn't produce them. So we need fish oil and we need light from the sun, and not just a few frequencies, but all the frequencies. And not just the visible, but we need some UVB and we need a bunch of IR, for infrared. Turns out the near infrared region, sorry, this is near, right here, this is mid. So some frequencies in the near infrared don't really heat us up as much as out here in the mid. For example, 810 nanometers of the infrared is a very important frequency which activates our mitochondria that reside inside of every cell in our body. And it's absolutely necessary for our mitochondria to work properly to get that infrared frequency at 810 nanometers. Now, that light wave activates the cytochrome-c-oxidase molecule. It's a chromophore inside the mitochondria that absorbs certain wavelengths. So that chromophore absorbs two peaks, one at 810 and one in the red at 660 nanometers. So when light hits the chromophore in our mitochondria, cytochrome-c-oxidase, it reacts to form in a complicated reaction ATP, which is the energy that all people need to feel good, to feel energetic and healthy. Every cell needs ATP. It's the fuel that runs our entire body, and it's in every single cell. Dr. Hamblin also pointed out that the wavelength doesn't have to be exactly 660 and 810. It can be anywhere in the mid-600s in terms of nanometers of wavelength of light, and also anywhere in the low 800s of light. Every single frequency of the full spectrum sunlight is on this graph, and I have just now given one example, but there's many, many more examples. That one example being mitochondria. So I hope this alone has convinced you that you need full spectrum sunlight. I want to take a moment to look again at the spectrum and remind you that I pointed out that there's a red and a near infrared frequency that activates the chromophores in the mitochondria, the cytochrome-c-oxidase chromophore, and that in turn allows the mitochondria to properly produce ATP, which runs every cell in our body. It's the energy source of life. And there's two more things that the infrared light gives to the body, and why infrared light is a nutrient, and why we shouldn't be taking it away from our natural lighting that we live in every day, the near, mid, and far infrared rays. One of those is nitric oxide, often abbreviated as NO in scientists' papers. Nitric oxide is a vasodilator that's used throughout the body to determine where the blood will flow. For example, if you have your hand in the sun and you begin to receive infrared rays from the sun, you might feel a wonderful, warm, tingly feeling of bliss. And that is the nitric oxide that is causing your constricted capillaries to open up and be bigger capillaries, so that before the blood couldn't get through, but now it can, because it's dilated. And so your microcapillaries begin to allow the blood to flow more freely. Or say if you're in a fight or flight response and you feel that your hands are very cold, that's normal because your body is not having nitric oxide in your hands, and it's causing the blood to go to your major organs so that if you lose a limb, you'll still survive. Now, and when you meditate, you send a message to your hands for you that you're safe, and then you form nitric oxide in your hands, and your hands become warm. So that's why one of the solutions to Raynaud's syndrome is to do biofeedback and learn how to meditate and cause your hands to be warm, because it takes away the fear sensation, for example, and allows you to relax, feel safe, and then your body tells the nitric oxide to be formed in your hands, and you get more warm blood flowing through it. So this is very, very important. The other very important thing that infrared does, and this is so important that I'm going to draw a picture of water So this is the oxygen molecule, O for oxygen, and then these are the two hydrogens. And when you shine certain photonic energy packets onto water, it will only absorb certain ones. And it turns out that water absorbs very heavily in the infrared range. And the infrared causes the water very gentle movement. And so, for example, this hydrogen will bounce in and out. This hydrogen will bounce in and out. Or it might be that they bounce in and out symmetrically or asymmetrically. And then also the water molecule might twist a bit, like twist, twist, twist. And those gentle forms of the water molecule jiggling allows the nutrients to go through, for example, the cytoplasm of the cell, which is an aqueous solution. If you've got a lot of water molecules and they're all jiggling, it's a lot easier for the nutrient to make it through the water molecule to where it's trying to go. If you don't have infrared rays so that they gently jiggle in this special way, it's not a way where you feel heat. It's just a way that the water molecules are awake. It's like lubricating the joints of the water molecule so that it's in there and it's jiggling around, and that way it's not like ice. It's not like, okay, so it's normally water molecules are all hydrogen bonded to each other to form giant clusters. Well, some wavelengths in the infrared, especially the far infrared, tend to break these clusters up. And that's a good thing, because then the water molecules aren't bound to each other. And so you have more routes to get for your nutrient to get through the cell and into its destination. For example, if you're taking a nutrient to the nucleus of the cell, you have to be able to enter the channel and go through to the nucleus. So I'll also say that microwave radiation does something different to the water, cycling it, positive, negative, so that the water molecule gets confused and it twists and it keeps trying to reorient into the field. And so you have these water molecules doing this very harsh, unnatural movement. And so that's actually an unhealthy thing for your cell. But just to have the water molecule kind of jiggling around gently to where, like I say, you don't feel heat from it necessarily. I mean, what happens is you get better nutrients in and then toxins out. So that's a very important part of infrared rays. So you have three things then. You have ATP production, you have vasodilation, nitric oxide, and blood flow regulation, and then you also have the water becoming a much better solvent, so that you have better transport of nutrients in and out of the cell. So I wanted to point that out before we move on to the next topic. I want to shift to what a human being experiences evolutionarily, like how did we evolve in terms of our relationship to full spectrum sunlight? Well, before we delve into the talk, I wanted to just remind you of a couple things.